West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, l'âge tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël.
Hamas terrorists launched new missile strikes at Israeli cities today, and in another Israeli town, troops were working through booby traps as they had to go house to house trying to retrieve the bodies of murdered residents. We've shown some of that video. Hamas has operated for over 25 years. There's nothing new about some of its methods to people in this region or familiar with the history, although, as we heard from an expert on tonight, the scale is certainly unprecedented. Now, some international scholars also see a broader trend and problem here, one that may not just stay in any given region, as these certain states, as well as non-state actors, are leading with terror and war crimes as a main and admitted part of their operations, something they even tout. And that goes beyond just the Mideast, from Hamas to Putin to Iran in the background to some other rising authoritarian and barbaric threats. The Hamas terrorists paid no attention to any modern laws of war or any norms of any kind, writes Pulitzer Prize winner Anne Applebaum in a new piece. And like the Russians, she notes, Hamas and its Iranian backers run nihilistic regimes whose goal is to undo whatever remains of the rules-based world order and to put anarchy in its place. Applebaum arguing that these groups do not simply flout or break international law and human rights, that they are mainlining a new type of sustained attack, or you could call it a terror war, that can actually operate in the long haul through its operations, through its potential sympathizers and support, and through, of course, some of the rhetoric that it distributes, where people are saying, well, yes, and, or here's why that is somewhat understandable, that the sum totality is to try to disassemble what has been an incremental but positive set of steps towards global human rights. A regime that was constructed, we should remember, in response specifically to the horrors of World War II. It was that war and its atrocities and its Holocaust, targeting many minorities, chiefly Jews and other minority groups, that catalyzed so many countries, who had, of course, many other disagreements, to reach this international baseline on the laws of war, protections for civilians and children, rules against terror and torture, the creation of the United Nations, Geneva Conventions, rules against torture, the Declaration of Human Rights, of International Human Rights as a party to the UN. All those things I just listed off didn't come out of the abstract. They came out of the horrors of World War II. And even amidst terrible conflicts and wars, there are many countries who have largely said they follow those things, so at least they're on the side of wanting to appear to follow them, and often do follow them. That may be crumbling. Applebaum brings up China, noting there's been reporting about how they detain over 1 million Uyghurs against their will in an attempt to eliminate that mostly Muslim minority group through mass internment camps, militarized surveillance. Note the connections here, as China, a geostrategic competitor, is also one of the only countries left of any great power where Vladimir Putin can travel, because he faces a warrant for arrest on international war crimes for targeting Ukrainian children, part of Russia's attacks and its form of war against civilians.
Russia has carried out more war crimes like this, deliberately targeting civilians for no other reason except to make civilians pay.
Ukrainians left dead in the streets. Authorities say civilians brutally murdered by the Russians.
She takes us to her brother's house, where she says she was raped by a Russian soldier on August 26.
Ukraine says Russia used this basement in the city of Kherson as a torture chamber.
There is supposed to be an international order. It has worked at times. When you see countries of this power and magnitude and non-state actors like these terror groups get this far against the West and against many of these groups, you see how some of this may actually be backsliding. Now, Applebaum, in her new piece, discusses how there are also cracks and fissures in the West. She argues U.S. leaders have refused to enforce anything resembling that order when they could. They've also violated some of these human rights rules themselves. She writes that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has notably indulged extreme voices, some of whom openly advocate for the mass expulsion of Arabs. Now Israel faces this brutal Hamas attack, which Applebaum argues is the kind of thing that some had wrongly thought might be in the past, abducting young women, beating them unconscious, dragging them across the border, a war crime as old as Homer's Iliad. We are here on day 4 of this war coverage, at the beginning, not the middle or end of whatever is coming. We are hearing discussions of human rights, of international law, of suffering, which certainly exists on both sides of this conflict, as with so many. We are also in a time where it is more important than ever to be clear, factual, and precise about what human rights are and what terrorism is, and why, since World War II and the Holocaust, the bulk, the main Western democracies, and even some of their foes, have tried to hold the line against genocide, against terrorism, against torture. And those groups moving against it are not just one more foe. When they are in concert with these other forces, many argue, they are a threat to the international order itself. I'm joined now by Anne Applebaum, who writes for The Atlantic, a Pulitzer Prize winner, author of several books, including Twilight of Democracy, The Seductive Lure of Authoritarianism, and the piece we just quoted, There Are No Rules, a new essay in The Atlantic. Welcome. You write that there is something much broader going on here. What is it?
I think we're seeing really the final deterioration of something that we used to call the rules-based world order, which was an aspirational set of ideas that were put into a series of documents, the UN Charter, you listed some of them before, the Geneva Conventions, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, all ideas that were often honored in the breach, but were nevertheless honored. States could be made embarrassed if they didn't abide by them. They sought to abide by them when they could. They would sometimes, even the United States would sometimes punish its soldiers if they broke the laws of war. So did other countries. And we're now seeing really countries, not just small terrorist groups, but states like Russia, and non-state actors like Hamas, which was actually backed by states and also had a kind of quasi-official role as the ruling party of Gaza. We're seeing them defy these rules in a blatant and almost enthusiastic way. You know, it's not just that we're going to commit acts of terror. We're going to do it, and we're going to film it, and we're going to put it on television, and we're going to put it on video, on social media. We're going to show you that we're going out of our way to kill people, to hit hospitals, to hit schools. And we've seen that in Russia, in the war in Ukraine, and we've just seen it again in Israel. And it, I think, represents something new.
Yes, you write that Hamas, as you mentioned, had won an election. It has that territory, so to speak, but is fundamentally a non-state actor with funding from Qatar, with backing by Iran. And then some level of whatever you want to call it, quasi-normalization, minimization, whataboutism, where its tactics are also sometimes either minimized or rhetorically supported. What does that tell you about the decline of the rules-based order you mentioned? Because it's one thing to say that there are innocent people in Russia or in these territories, and many innocent people in these territories facing terrible conditions. And it's another thing for people even in the West to apparently minimize or seem to say that the tactics of terrorism, the barbarism of, for example, deliberately murdering children, is somehow on the table.
I mean, look, the barbarism deliberately murdering children should be eliminated from any normal discourse, just like the Russian program of kidnapping thousands of Ukrainian children and taking them to Russia should also be considered such a heinous crime that Vladimir Putin, shouldn't be, allowed to conduct normal diplomacy. And actually, we do have bodies that have made that declaration. So the International Criminal Court has found Putin guilty of kidnapping Ukrainian children, and he will have difficulty visiting some countries as a result, the countries that respect the rule of that court. But you're right that not everybody does. People look for, as you say, whataboutism. They look for other explanations, and that is part of a general deterioration that there, in my article, I give quite a lot of reasons why that's happened, and some of them are our fault, and some of them are the fault of great powers like China, which has spent a lot of the last decade trying to undermine those UN laws, trying to change the UN language, trying to remove human rights from the international conversation and replace it with the language of sovereignty, which for China means we get to do what we want and you don't get to talk about it.
It is Thursday, the 12th of October of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya. A little bit of spice in your life. Well, okay, so sorry about yesterday. We had some last-minute tech issues, and could be important because it just means the degradation of the old machine is degrading further, and we need to replace that old machine. So, but it doesn't need to be a Mac, so we're good there. Oh yeah. Doesn't need to be, but we still need another one, and put it in the array so that we can do the job that the founders originally intended so many years ago. If you know about that. So yes, indeed, sorry about yesterday, and but I gotta confess, there was quite a bit going on just here in real life at the home front, taking care of Mom and everything else. So I was able to utilize the time and for real life rather than sit down and make another show when I was able to get the machinery, empty cache and everything else. So limping it along is the professional terminology for, this kind of technology. Phew. All right. Well, how were you from yesterday and till today and the day before? Because it's been a little bit of time and a lot happens now. Boy, it looks like Donald Trump had a rally in Florida, and I think he signed on to that open letter that students at Harvard and Penn and any number of universities are being doxxed for saying that, they didn't read the petition, obviously, because a lot of students are saying, wait, is that what it said? And so they're taking the names off it, and good reason too. But I heard Morning Joe complain I just don't understand why is there a blind spot in the universities and the colleges for this anti-Semitism? It's not anti-Semitic to be concerned about a displaced people who happen to be Palestinian. Okay? Now, that's not to say that one agrees with terrorism. All right? But let's not pretend. All right? There's a lot of discrimination and bigotry on both sides, and I'm not saying that there's bad people on both sides, because there are. And there's good people on both sides, because there are. But I'm not going to both sides it like that. But when you got a Donald Trump going out there and praising Hezbollah, when he means Hamas, he thinks Hezbollah attacked when it was Hamas. Well, Hezbollah might start thinking, you know what? Maybe we oughta. And that's what we don't want, okay? So here's Donald Trump out there essentially saying, and he also insulted the state of Israel, their military, their intel, which is pretty much tied to our intel, in that we get intel from them. And how was their intel disrupted? I think I gotta tell you. It all points back to Vlad. And who was the leader of the free world when he gave up? And we know this for a fact. Israeli intel to Vlad. So people are saying, it was like the Iron Dome. I think that what was given up was more like assets. People. If that's the way that Donald Trump works. Look how he went after those 2 black women, volunteer electoral workers in the South. Look how he goes after anybody of color, or anybody who's not white. Has a special hate for that. And we know it. So a lot of news about the students who erroneously signed a petition versus a guy who looks like he's pretty well unhinged, mentally incompetent, and if not mentally incompetent, he's a raging Nazi. About time people started talking about that. I mean, who has Mein Kampf on their bedstand? Okay? Jesus. I read Mein Kampf. I don't feel compelled to even have it in my collection. Sorry. William F. Buckley Jr. and other leaders of the conservative movement in America are okay to have in my collection. Mein Kampf? No, thank you. Okay. I boycott that one. And we all should. Let me put it this way. We should be aware of it. We should actually read it. Okay? Because then you'll realize what an unhinged fellow that guy was. And no wonder he appeals to the unhinged. Just don't call him deplorable, right? Right. What else is going on in the world? Oh, gosh. Environmental calamity. Earthquakes in Afghanistan over and over and over. That's a rocky, rubbly kind of country. Any kind of shaking is going to really cause the rubble to rumble down a hillside, crushing and killing a lot of people. And that's apparently what's going on, and we don't get to hear about it. We don't get to hear about Trump praising Hezbollah and insulting Israel. And we don't get to hear about thousands of people dying in Afghanistan from these, and they're not temblors. They're not like aftershocks. They're full-blown earthquakes with the aftershocks. Jeez. Has nothing to do with the environment, but my God. Okay. Saudi Arabia can't take our can't grow alfalfa and use our aquifers anymore. Thank you. You know what's illegal in Saudi Arabia to grow alfalfa because of how much water it takes? So they came here, and who did they sucker into letting them have pretty much carte blanche on the aquifers in the area? Yeah, Republican-led states. Man, these guys turn over to anybody who's got like a little bit of money. I mean, they're bottom feeders. You think that they'd be hitting them up for the big bucks, but they are so easily bought off with pittance. God. That's not making America great. But you know what does make America great? I think Joe gave a fantastic speech about Israel. And then you see this weird guy in Florida. He can't even stand up straight. Jeez. And they say that Joe is just, he's so incompetent. He's like, he's so diminished in his mental capacity. Projection be thy name. Because that guy, Donald Trump, as I said, he's either has a greatly diminished mental capacity, or he's a raging Nazi, MAGA Nazi. And I guess you can be both, actually. Because either one and both makes you unfit for office, and that's exactly what apparently a large swath of Americans want. They know so little about America. So little. They have an idea. And anything that shows them the actual truth, in hopes that maybe one might have a little bit of empathy for those that you ground your heel into their throats over, is considered to be woke. You can't force me to be nice. You can't force me to be a good neighbor. How about a suggestion? You're trying to cancel my aggression. Damn right. Jeez, get a clue, pal. You want to live in civilized society? Apparently they don't. Well, I don't want to live in an uncivilized society. So part of a civilized society is to making sure the uncivilized don't have an impact upon our, exalted, evolved state. Because let's not kid ourselves. Do you want chaos? Or do you want, a little collective agreement? That's not order. It's a collective agreement. Biological organisms always fare better in agreement rather than in conflict. Everybody says, you hear everybody saying, it's the battle of the species, the strongest shall survive. No, those who are able to cooperate survive. God. Even jellyfish figured it out. You think it's like one thing. It's like it's a community. Actually, it's a collection of communities. Okay. I'm not a biologist, but I took a class or 2 or 5. I like biology. I know a lot of people didn't want to dissect frogs and all of that, but I don't know. Has to be done. Okay. And we did. I had a great butterfly collection, insect collection, and I had them all like pegged with little, needle pegs and the Latin names for every single one on these like little cards that I cut out and stuff. And it looked really good. Kept those, put them in frames. Now people will say, what's wrong with that kid? Yeah, he probably did then too. But I wasn't the only one that had an insect collection, butterfly collection. That's what you did. Go show it at 4-H. Had the big old 4-H stuff at the county fair. And the science fairs, all the science fairs that we took part in. Boy, some of us even became scientists. Mad scientists? Maybe. Maybe. All right. Enough of the blibber blabber. What do we have in store for you that we didn't give to you yesterday? And we do apologize, but we're going to give it to you anyway. Well, starting at the top, yeah, that was Ari. And I got to tell you, sometimes Ari pisses me off because he gives platforms to people. But I know we got to have like this other side so we know how to argue against him. Well, you're giving them a platform and, they get to spew their stuff. But anyway, I do appreciate what Ari does, all in all. So at the top, yeah, the Hamas terrorism echoes the barbaric playbook from Putin to ISIS. And I might even say, like, even before that, geez, like Peter the Great, Ivan the Terrible. They didn't call him Ivan the Terrible because he was nice. He was a barbarian royal. He was a barbarian royal. Well, yeah, barbarian in terms of the way that he attended to other humans. Ick. On the rest of the menu, Nebraska voters will decide next year whether public money can go to private school tuition. Man, still after that, aren't they? Virginia's Democratic members of Congress asked for a DOJ probe after voters were removed from the state electoral rolls in error. And a former Alabama lawmaker pled guilty to a voter fraud charge for using a fake address to run for office. And I got to tell you, that's a lot more rampant, especially on the Republican side, than we take credit for. Hey, after the break, we move to the chef's table, where Russia was defeated in its bid to regain a seat on the UN's top human rights body, and Finland charged that damage to an undersea gas pipeline and telecommunications cable that connects Finland with Estonia appears to have been caused by external activity. And they don't mean fish. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page, is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so. Across the page to the left from that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is, of course, the link to our Patreon page. And if you could afford to send us what you might spend on, I don't know, an espresso-type coffee drink, or, I don't know, a little bauble of jewelry, if you could afford to send us those funds instead, we're able then to pool those with resources sent to us by like-minded individuals just like you. And then we're able to put a big dent in the ever-increasing costs and bills that it takes to run this powerhouse of resistance. And we do thank you for your generosity out there in letting us fulfill that civic duty that the founders originally intended for us so many years ago, because it really does help. And really, thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, I guess. Hopefully we'll be there soon. You can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those, and thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, Instagram, Tumblr. I think I'm supposed to do Meta if I'm doing... or Threads, that's what it is, Threads. If I'm doing Instagram or one of those, I can't remember. I have it, but regardless, You can mostly find me anywhere on social media at Justice Putnam or simply as Justice Putnam, depending, of course. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime. And that way you can read the actual reportage. And that's why we like it. So do check out the show notes and links diary and check out those links. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, you can do so at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, really wherever podcasts can be found. Just can't find them on Stitcher anymore. Just can't. Nope. Okay. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Marjorie A. Beck from the Associated Press. Nebraska's top election official confirmed that state voters will decide next year whether public money can go to private school tuition. Get out of here. A petition effort to get the question on the November 2024 ballot far exceeded the number of valid signatures needed to put the controversial question before voters, the Nebraska Secretary of State's office said in a written statement. The effort seeks to repeal a measure passed by the Nebraska legislature earlier this year, allowing millions in state income tax to be diverted to organizations that grant private school tuition scholarships. That passage set up a battle between powerful education unions and heavily funded conservative groups trying to make their mark on school policies following COVID-19 lockdowns and ongoing fights over transgender policies. Get out of here. In August, the Support Our Schools referendum petition turned in 117,000 signatures to the Nebraska Secretary of State, nearly double the more than 61,000 valid signatures needed to make the ballot. And Nebraska Secretary of State Bob Evnen announced that election officials validated nearly 92,000 of those collected signatures. The new school funding law does not appropriate taxpayer dollars directly towards private school vouchers. Instead, it allows businesses, individuals, estates, and trusts to donate a portion of their owed state income tax. Oh, yeah, that's one way to do it. Shrink government down to the size where you can put a knee on its throat and choke it off. I think that's what they really want to do. Businesses and individuals would be allowed to donate up to $100,000 per year, while estates and trusts could offer up to $1 million a year. Sarah Rankin of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. The Democratic members of Virginia's congressional delegation have called on the U.S. Department of Justice to investigate after an apparent administrative error led to at least 275 people being improperly removed from the state's voter rolls. Republican Governor Youngkin's administration acknowledged last week that it was working to address the problem, which it said stemmed from a misclassification of felony probation violations as felony convictions and data transmitted to the Elections Department by the state police. In Virginia, a felony conviction automatically results in the loss of a person's civil rights, such as the right to vote, serve on a jury, run for office, and carry a firearm. The governor has the sole discretion to restore those civil rights, apart from firearm rights, which can be restored by a court. Officials initially said the number of impacted voters was unclear. They have since said that 275 have been identified so far, all of whom will be quickly reinstated to the voter rolls, too late for any elections that they were kicked out of. A letter from the state's 2 Democratic senators and 6 Democratic members of the House said the error has created a barrier to the democratic process for these affected Virginians, with early voting already underway for the November election. It called on the DOJ to look into the matter as a possible violation of the Voting Rights Act or other federal laws. The Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A former Alabama lawmaker pled guilty to a voter fraud charge that he rented a closet-sized space in a home to fraudulently run for office in a district where he did not live. Former state representative David Cole, a Republican from Huntsville, pled to a charge of voting in an unauthorized location. A judge sentenced Cole to 60 days at the Madison County Jail. The remainder of a 3-year sentence was suspended, and he will be placed on probation for that time, according to the terms of a plea agreement with prosecutors. The judge also ordered him to pay $52,885 in restitution. Cole resigned from the Alabama House of Representatives in August after agreeing to plead guilty. Cole, who was elected in 2022, signed a lease in 2021 to pay $5 per month for a 5-by-5-foot space in a home in order to run for office in House District 10, according to the plea agreement. Cole had some mail sent there, but never stepped past the entry foyer. On the 2 times he visited the location he claimed as his residence, the agreement said. Alabama law requires candidates to live in a legislative district for 1 year before they run for office. A lot of voter fraud on that side of the aisle, don't you think? Well, let us now go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, not what you might expect. The trailers for The Creator would have you prepared for a Terminator or Independence Day style shoot-'em-up, and in fact, the first few minutes of the film, after the faux 50s robot newsreels, lean that way as well, with our protagonist, John David Washington's Agent Joshua Taylor, losing his wife to the enemy, and thus being appropriately motivated. That enemy is the AI-controlled nation of New Asia, supposedly responsible for the nuclear destruction of Los Angeles 10 years prior. His righteous cause is soon muddied as what follows is an off-ramp into what the U.S. Army dubbed, 100 and some years ago, going native for soldiers who started developing doubts about the genocide with which they were involved. It's not that we haven't seen this before, think Avatar, but there's more going on here as the U.S.'s commitment to destroy all AI becomes commingled with destroying a non-white culture that apparently lives in peace with AI. Says the robot simulant Alfie at the center of the plot, I want all robots to be free. And then there's the idea of non-human rights, which in modern sci-fi is often a convention to define humanity. With a budget a third of similar pictures, director Gareth Edwards has achieved a gritty yet stunning look here. It's shot ultra-wide with a Sony prosumer camera with natural lighting and what are termed guerrilla filmmaking techniques. The effects are spare, with most of that budget going to the awesome depiction of the Allies' Nomad weapons platform, which is both a menacing and symbolic presence. Daring directing, spectacular production design, and good acting overcome some script shortcomings and flirtations with cliché to make the creator one not to miss. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. From a very young age, we're encouraged to eat fruits and vegetables. Unfortunately, many Americans are not getting the message. Dr. Seung-Hee Lee Kwan is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. She's joining us today to discuss the importance of eating enough fruits and vegetables. Welcome to the show, Seung-Hee.
Thank you for having me.
Seung-Hee, what is the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables?
The federal guidelines recommend that adults consume at least 1.5 cups to 2 cups of fruit and 2 to 3 cups of vegetables each day. This is for adults who get less than 30 minutes of physical activity a day. Adults who are more physically active need more calories and thus should be eating more fruits and vegetables. 1 cup is about 12 strawberries or 1 large tomato.
How many people consume the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables?
We found that very few adults are getting enough fruits and vegetables. Just 12% are eating the recommended amount of fruits, and less than 1 in 10 eat enough vegetables. And consumption is lower among men, young adults, and adults living in poverty.
Why is eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables so important?
Eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can help with 3 things. 1, it can reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and deaths, such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, some cancers, and even obesity. It can also add important nutrients that are commonly missing in Americans' diet. And it can help with weight management if adults consume fruits and vegetables instead of other calorie-dense foods.
How can we meet the recommended daily intake of fruits and vegetables?
Try to fill half of your plate with fruits or vegetables at each meal or every eating occasion. Making fruits and vegetables the focal point of your meal will help you meet your recommendations. For example, recent studies have shown that adults get most of their fruit during breakfast and snacks. So you can try adding berries to your morning oatmeal or grab a piece of fresh fruit as an afternoon snack. For vegetables, most adults eat them at dinner, so try adding more into your lunch by adding a side salad or packing a snack of baby carrots or grape tomatoes.
Are canned or frozen products just as good as fresh?
All forms of fruits and vegetables count towards meeting the recommendations. For the most health benefits, make sure that the fruits and vegetables you consume have a limited amount of salt, butter, sugar, or creamy sauces. When selecting canned fruits, choose the ones with lowest sugars. And for canned or frozen vegetables, choose those lower in sodium.
Where can listeners get more information about eating a healthy diet?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/nutrition or choosemyplate.gov.
Thanks, Seung-Hee. I've been talking today with Seung-hee Lee Kwon about the importance of eating a healthy diet. Eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can help reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and death and add important nutrients to your diet. Make sure you're eating enough. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Wouldn't it be great if life came with a remote control? You know, you could hit pause when you needed to, or hit rewind, like that time you knocked down that wasp's nest. Uh-oh. Well, life doesn't always give you time to change the outcome, but prediabetes does. With early diagnosis and a few healthy changes, you can stop prediabetes before it leads to type 2 diabetes. To learn your risk, take the 1-minute test today at doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its prediabetes awareness partners.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. We reported yesterday that a federal appeals court chose a fairer congressional redistricting map in Alabama, giving black voters a better shot at electing the candidates of their choice. Other states also have racial gerrymandering cases pending, but it's unclear whether the resolution in Alabama will translate to fairness in Louisiana and South Carolina. Louisiana's African American population is even larger than Alabama's at 33%, yet it has only one congressional majority-minority district out of 6, 16.6%. In late September, 2 conservative U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals judges blocked further action on new fair maps. Democracy advocates immediately asked the U.S. Supreme Court for an emergency stay, but it's unclear whether Justice Samuel Alito, in charge of emergency stays, will grant that request or pass it on to the full court, where Justice Brett Kavanaugh could reconsider his Milligan position. October 11th, oral arguments in a South Carolina case will be heard in the U.S. Supreme Court, raising even more concerns. The South Carolina legislature argues its congressional map is partisan gerrymandering, not racial gerrymandering. In 2019, the High Court deemed partisan gerrymandering to be a state, not federal issue. If the court decides it was done for partisan reasons, it may greenlight more dilution of black voting power by state legislatures, just cloaked as partisan gerrymandering. We have more at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1899. That was the day union miners in Mount Olive, Illinois, began commemorating Miners' Day. Every year, thousands came into town for a parade, music, and speeches. Mount Olive was the site of the only union-owned cemetery in the United States, established by UMWA Local 728 in the aftermath of the Verdun Massacre. A year before to the day, striking miners had been killed in a shootout with company goons attempting to herd scabs into the mines in Verdun, Illinois. But, as Mother Jones biographer Elliot Gorn notes, the train never unloaded its cargo, and the company was forced to settle. The union hoped to erect a gravesite monument commemorating those miners who had been killed at Verdun, but they were refused by those who considered the fallen miners to be murderers and not martyrs. That's when the United Mine Workers established the Union Miners Cemetery. And on this day, 10,000 100,000 turned out for the union's memorial ceremony. The United Mine Workers unveiled a monument dedicated to the fallen Verdun miners E.W. Smith, Joe Gitterly, Ernest Kramer, and E.F. Long. The day was filled with parades, music, laying of wreaths, and speeches. Haymarket widow and radical activist Lucy Parsons was among the speakers. In his book, Death and Dying in the Working Class, Michael Rossnow notes that her presence drew a direct connection between the fallen miners and the Haymarket martyrs, cut down while advancing the cause of labor. Thousands traveled to Mount Olive every year for celebrations, including Eugene V. Debs, miners leader John Mitchell, and Mother Jones. In 1923, Mother Jones asked to be buried with her boys, noting they are responsible for Illinois being the best organized labor state in America.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin, whether from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 45 degrees Fahrenheit, a bit cooler than what we've had, but we will be a little warmer than yesterday. We're looking at highs about 72 to 73 degrees today, mostly cloudy, and a bit of sun later on in the afternoon. Winds will be light and variable, then a few clouds overnight. Lows once again around 45, winds light and variable, then partly cloudy skies tomorrow during the morning hours, then will become increasingly overcast in the afternoon. Highs back down in the mid-60s, winds light and variable, and it looks like we may have cloudy conditions for the eclipse. No! So we'll follow that as it develops. Looks like, ragweed pollen is the predominant pollen out there in their little town of Rogue River, and it is rated moderate. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 13 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is in the moderate range at level 4. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.05 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles. And relative humidity is at 98%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that makes up the Weather Underground. London is 60 degrees and cloudy with a potential disruption because of rain. Paris is 72 and cloudy with a warning for a potential disruption due to wind and rain. Oh my. Rome is 81 and sunny. Kabul is 64 and clear. Kiev is 68 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 80 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 66 and mostly cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 53 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 55 and sunny. Chicago, Illinois is 57 degrees with rain with a small craft advisory on the lake. And New York, New York is 65 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. letterer of the Associated Press, brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Russia was defeated in its bid to regain a seat in the UN's premier human rights body by a significant majority in an election in the General Assembly, which voted last year to suspend Moscow after its invasion of Ukraine. Russia was competing against Albania and Bulgaria for 2 seats on the Geneva-based Human Rights Council representing the East European regional group. In a secret ballot vote, Bulgaria got 160 votes, Albania received 123, and Russia just 83 votes. Russia has claimed that it has support from a silent majority, and even though 83 votes came from less than half the 193 UN member nations, there is certain to be a concern, especially by Ukraine and its Western allies, that Moscow's support was that high. I think the Russians will be pleased that they persuaded a sizable minority of UN members to back them, which suggests that Moscow is not a total pariah in the UN system, despite repeated Western criticism. Richard Gowan, UN Director of the International Crisis Group, told the AP. Moscow's UN ambassador, Vasily Nebenzia, accused the United States of leading a campaign to prevent their return to the Council. The United States and others sent letters to many of the 193 members of the General Assembly urging a vote against Russia, according to diplomats. Felice Gar, director of the American Jewish Committee's Jacob Blaustein Institute for the Advancement of Human Rights, was among the non-government letter writers, also urging Russia's defeat.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Jerry Tanner of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Damage to an undersea gas pipeline and telecommunications cable connecting Finland and Estonia appears to have been caused by external activity, Finnish officials said, adding that authorities were investigating. Finnish and Estonian gas system operators on Sunday said they noted an unusual drop in pressure in the Baltic Connector pipeline, after which they shut down the gas flow. The Finnish government said there was damage both to the gas pipeline and to a telecommunications cable between the two NATO countries. Speaking at a news conference on Tuesday, Prime Minister Orpo stopped short of calling the pipeline leak sabotage, but said it could not have been caused by regular operations. Finland's National Bureau of Investigation was leading an inquiry into the leak, adding that the leak occurred in Finland's economic zone. According to Estonian authorities, the damaged area of the data cable owned by the Finnish mobile operator and internet service provider Elisa is likely located in Estonia's economic zone, and Estonia's military was investigating that matter. In the Estonian capital, Tallinn, Defense Minister Pevkur told reporters Estonian authorities received photos confirming that the damage in the Baltic Connector is mechanical and human-made. The incident comes just over a year after the Nord Stream gas pipelines running between Germany and Russia in the Baltic Sea were damaged by explosions believed to be sabotage, that case remains unsolved. But we have some speculations, don't we? Yes, we do. Finland is well prepared, Orpo said. Protecting critical infrastructure is already a very important issue with the change in the security environment, and attention has been paid to it. In the background, among other things, a wide network of actors has been built to secure critical infrastructure. Asked by a reporter whether the government suspected Russian involvement in the latest incident, Orpo said he didn't want to speculate on potential perpetrators before authorities completed the investigation in Finland. Well, that's diplomatic, and that's because it's his job. And that is also bringing us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.